If you're a business owner feeling stuck, overwhelmed, and ready to grow, you're in the right place. Welcome to Small Business Pivots, where founders share insights, stories, and pivots that lead to sustainable growth. I'm your host, Michael D. Morrison, a business coach helping business owners get unstuck and grow. All right, welcome to another Small Business Pivots, where we have special guests from around the world. And if you've listened or watched the podcast before, you know that I feel like no one can introduce themselves or the business like the business owner. So Josh, I'm going to let you have the floor to introduce yourself and maybe a little background about your business and maybe your upbringing, so people kind of know your journey of how you got where you are today.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Michael. Appreciate the invite. And that's what I love about this podcast as well, is I love hearing the guests really speak about their journey and in their words. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be a part of it. So yeah, I grew up in a family business. My dad started a construction business back in 1974, back in the 70s. Yeah, I was the youngest of 5 kids. And by the age 16, I was swinging a hammer, whether I wanted to or not.
Right.
I was in the crew. Framing, swinging a hammer is generous. Probably the first couple of years, I was cutting lumber, I was grinding concrete, I was doing the crummy job. So I learned how to work. By age 21, I was a business owner. So just for context, I'm the youngest of 5. And by the time I was coming into the business, my dad was exiting the business. My dad was already partnership with my 3 brothers, also a sister that's not involved in the business. And so I essentially bought my dad out and became part of the business at 21. And we created what I affectionately call the 4-headed monster back at 21 years of age. So I was young. Like I didn't know what business ownership was. I only say I didn't really feel like I became a business owner until 2019, but yeah. So from there, I spent 10 years in operations. I managed people and projects. I think when I started, I thought those are different things. And over time, I found out it's the same. You're managing people to get projects done. My titles kind of changed. Production manager, operations manager. It was really the same thing, managing people and projects. And then I went through a season, I would say, of where I was challenged. 2018, 19, and 2020. I went through some pivots, I would say, in terms of where the business was at. And I found out that in order to change your business, I needed to change as well. So 2018 was probably be a significant challenge in terms of we had a key supplier that went bankrupt on us. So I don't know if you know anything about construction margins, but there's not a lot there. And so paying for materials once is okay, but paying for it twice is a lot less fun. Yeah. So it was a real challenge. We stood behind our work. We got the job done. But we didn't make a lot of money on that project, to put it mildly. So it instantly put our business into a state that we weren't expecting or hadn't experienced before. In 2019, my brother Herman and I, so he's the oldest, I'm the youngest, the bookends, we bought our brothers out. So the 4-headed monster became a 2-headed monster. And business got a lot simpler then, just because we're both very aligned in terms of how we operate the business, how we think, where we wanted the business to go. But that was a significant change. And that's when suddenly, when you own 50% of a business, suddenly payroll seems a lot bigger for some reason. So that was probably that number 2. And number 3, I think in that time period in 2020, my wife and I, more on a personal level, went through some season of loss. We lost our son, who would have been the youngest. And so just those 3 sort of events over that really 2-year span, I would say changed me fundamentally. I lost any sense of entitlement that I had. I always describe entitlement as sort of your expectation of what life owes you, right? Like, I got to the point where it's like, you know what, my profit and loss statement doesn't owe me money. My business doesn't owe me profits. People don't owe me hard work. Like, I need to go and create the world that I want to live in. I need to be really intentional. And so that sort of really shaped, I would say, my leadership going forward, although at the time I didn't see it that way. So, and over time, I think by 2022, that led me to starting a consulting firm. So it's certainly been a journey, but yeah. That's the short version, I guess I would say.
Well, it sounds like many entrepreneurship journeys, right? We all have those peaks and valleys and learn as we go, because there's really not a playbook, for all the different cycles in a business and life. And so I'm sorry to hear your loss and those other things. So are you still in the construction business now, or did you exit that?
Yeah, yeah, we're still in the construction business. It's grown since then. We've added on some other business units as well, but yeah, it's still going strong and it's still a key part of our portfolio of businesses for sure. Yeah.
So what I love about podcast is, or the guest is when they actually have experience in what they're talking about and not just something that they learned from a book or a university or some type of school. And so you have real life experience. And so the consulting you do, can you kind of share what that is and how it works, how it helps people?
Yeah. So um, to some degree, I got into it somewhat accidentally, but I had a number of opportunities come up at the same time. And at the time, I sort of done a lot of work in our construction business. Things were pretty stable. A lot of the work, was getting more sort of day to day, which is not like I'm, your typical ADHD guy. I love challenges. I love problems, and I started to get bored. So it was a blessing in disguise. So I had an opportunity to work with a couple different business owners, and yeah, I guess what I've found is a lot of folks have tried a lot of things, and they can't figure out why their business isn't changing, why their organization is stuck. And so, bottom line, what I do is I help business owners sort of like guide them through the change or the transformation of their organization. My typical client is stuck. Doesn't mean they're like in distress always. It means that they're stuck. And what I often say is that businesses usually reach the first 80% of their potential pretty quickly. They're masters at the craft. They're usually good at what they do. They're recognizing the industry. Like we were all those things as well. The problem is that last 20% was elusive. They kept trying different ways, scaling back, scaling forward, hiring this person, hiring that person, trying this framework. They couldn't just seem to unlock that last 20%. But once you do, I found that's actually where 80% of the value is. So suddenly it's like, oh man, business got really easy, right? Because you're aligned, either people on the team. It's not magic, doesn't change overnight. But when you start to unlock that last 20%, business becomes fun, right? So I sort of guide sort of I would say the group through the process. By group, I mean there's usually internal and external parties. Internally, we're talking leadership team, we're talking the owner himself, we're talking the operator. Externally, we're often dealing with sort of shareholders or dealing with other related parties, whether sometimes it's a spouse. Often I have lots of meetings with spouses talking about where the business is going. And sometimes it's banks, it's lenders, it's I've dealt with insurance and bonding, that sort of thing. So it's getting everybody on board to understand this is where we're taking the business, and let's all get our energy in the same direction, right? So that's what I do. I help change businesses.
Well, I love your tagline on your website. It says, "Great businesses aren't born, they're built." And I know for a
Mm-hmm.
lot of entrepreneurs, they just want to fix things right real quick. And I love you kind of didn't say my quote word for word, but it was kind of in that same direction. I always say, until I change, nothing around me changes. Right. So, can you kind of explain some of the different facets of business that you have found that are more critical than others that you might want to start looking here first? So, kind of like, what are some of those common challenges that a lot of business have that we can kind of pinpoint and give our listeners some insights?
Yeah. I would say the key structural challenge is usually financial. In the small business world, a lot of folks, you can't afford to hire a $400,000 CFO. So we're usually just doing the best we can. We're bookkeeping at night. We don't want to give away our precious money to spend it on, overhead, right? So a lot of business owners don't truly know how their business is doing, or even at a more granular level, how their projects are doing, right? So if you don't know how your projects are doing, you don't have clear numbers in front of you on a monthly basis, you're driving in the dark, right? Like it doesn't work. So that would probably be the key structural challenge. And most business owners underestimate the amount of work it takes to clean it up, to have good books. So that's probably the key sort of technical challenge. And the other key challenge I would say is more like cultural. What is culture? That's $1 million question. If you Google that, you find 300 definitions on what culture is. I always define culture as how the environment sort of influences behaviors, right? So what I see is you can take one person and they can walk into 6 different cultures in the same day, act 6 totally different ways, and they feel 100% in line with their values, right? So how someone behaves, at a funeral versus at work versus go on vacation with the family versus meeting the parents for the first time, when your wife's parents for the first time, like how you behave in each situation is dramatically different, right? It's because there's sort of an expectation around how you behave, and each business has an expectation around how you behave, and usually some of those expectations are actually what has brought you to where you're at, right? So, I think it's Sir Walter Demings who said, your business is perfectly designed to get the results it's getting, right? So you are where you are because of what you've done. And so you have to really look underneath that and say, what are the key habits or behaviors that I'm doing as a business leader? And by extension, I'm allowing my team to do, I'm accepting this behavior. What are those things that I'm doing that is really holding our business back? And most of us don't, they call blind spots, right? We don't see those, myself included. So we need people in our circle to tell us what those are. And until you destroy those, you're stuck, going from framework to framework and consultant to consultant.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of frameworks out there, aren't there?
Yeah, there certainly are. Yeah, I always say I'm framework agnostic. I'll work with anybody, and
Yeah,
most of them I think are a lot of value, but
yeah.
they're not always the foundational aspects. Yeah.
So, what as far as strategy or a plan, anything like that? What do you see that business owners should be focusing on, just from the challenges that you see? Because you mentioned something really interesting that I always say, and that's that the business challenges a business owner has, he either allowed or he created. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of times business owners, like you said, you were 21, you knew nothing about business. You just walked into it and you had what you had. So what are some of those strategies or plans that a business should have in place so they at least have a sense of direction?
Yeah. So I have a couple. I won't say frameworks because the people that I deal with always have sort of PTSD around that. So, but I often take folks through sort of like I call it the reality framework, for lack of better terminology. But there's 4 pieces to it. Number one, what is reality? Like in my situation, like what is real? And the question I often ask is, how do you know if a line is crooked or not? And the answer is, well, you need a straight line beside it, right? If you're always looking at the same line and you're standing in the middle of it, you can't tell that it's like you don't, without a version of what healthy is, it's hard to say, am I healthy or unhealthy? Like, what are you measuring yourself against? And so that's sort of the number one is where are we? But also, like, as a group, as a team, as an organization, do we all see the same thing? And often, actually, I would say all the time, that is not the case. So your banker sees a business that might be failing or is canary in the coal mine, has some challenges in the future. The business owner might be optimistic and says things are going the right direction, or if it's not going the right direction, he may be thinking this thing's failing. What do I do? But he's not telling his team that because they might just quit on him, right? So we're saying everything's fine, right? So you have this sort of all these different realities playing out until we all agree, okay, this is where we're at. Step one, do we all agree this is where we're at? And that can be quite challenging. It requires transparency, and it requires sort of a vulnerability that a lot of folks just aren't even willing to do. And number one. Number two, now that we agree on where we are, I think self-reflection is, how do we get here? Right? And that requires ownership. Like, we have to own how we got to where we got to, right? Until you own it, you ain't going to change it, right? So that's step two. Step three is, okay, where we want to take this thing. And that can be challenging as well. Like, sometimes we all have different visions of what we're trying to build. But we haven't agreed on that, right? So it's important that we all get on the same page. What are we trying to build here? Are we trying to grow this business? Are we trying to be like super professional? For example, a lot of businesses try to shift from being a sort of mom and pop, seat your pants, do things on the fly, to being a professional organization. But they don't really want to be a professional organization because that would mean systems, processes. It means you don't have the same latitude to make things. Like, do you want what your want comes with, right? So having the same vision, a very clear vision of where is this business going, and do we all agree with that? Step three, the last step I would say is step four now is what are we willing to do, right? What must be true for that vision to happen? And that's sort of habits commitment. So I often use the gym example, right? Like, everybody wants a six pack, but not everybody's in the gym. Right. So what you need to do is boil down what is the going to the gym for you, right? So if you, for example, I've had an organization where there's a lot of like infighting and toxicity and sort of a lot of like faking fine. We all hate each other, but we're not going to say it out loud. Going to the gym for them was like being honest, like actually stop and say, this is how I'm feeling. Hey, you hurt me. Like, it sounds maybe kind of goopy, but it is what it is, right? Like, what is that pattern that you need to break? And in that process, when you go through sort of those 4 steps, some people are like, yeah, I'm all game with where you want to go, but I don't want to go there that way. And they leave and they say, no, thank you. Right. Or they say yes. More commonly, they say yes, but their actions show that they're not going with you. Right. So it's important as a business owner that, for example, I do step one. I'm often saying, this is where you're at. And sometimes they're fighting with me on that and saying, well, I don't think so. Usually the business owner's like, oh my, that's the first time someone's ever told me that. So once they have a grasp on where they currently are, then they can solve the problem, right? So no one solves the problem they don't see in the first place. So I think that's sort of a key element to sort of identifying reality and working that through. The second thing I would say is just sort of like just a very tangible turnaround plan, right? So, and to me, a turnaround plan is like most people don't know how their business model works. Like, how do you make money? Do you know how you make money? What are the key levers? And if you can narrow it down to 1, 2, 3 key levers that define whether or not you're profitable, then you can just focus on those 3 levers, right? And then you can take it to your team and boil it down to their language. And so I always just help teams build a 90-day plan. In 90 days, where will you be? And it's got to be doable. It's got to be achievable, but it also has to be aggressive enough. Most times, if I make a fault, or if most people make a fault, it's we're not aggressive enough. We're not cutting deep enough. We're not restructuring enough. We're too nice, right? So I think building an actual tangible like business model plan, and it's not like a lot of folks do. Like, I want to make go from a $5 million to a $10 million business. What I would do is say, okay, a year from now, what does October look like? Right? This year is $1.1 million. You did it with so many clients, and you work out your business model. What does October look like next month? Right? Next year, sorry, right? So if you know if you work all that out in detail, then it's a matter of saying, okay, how do you get from A to B, right? How do we increase our clients by 2% per month? How do we increase our rate? What are we selling differently? You can start to have those tangible conversations, but until you can really define what does October look like in 2027, it's very difficult. You're just kind of throwing numbers around, put them on a spreadsheet, but nothing really changes on the ground floor.
You mentioned toxic, environments and things. And so when I hear that word, I think of family owned businesses. And you mentioned the 4-headed monster. So I know that we have some family owned businesses on here, and I know some of them are not enjoying that partnership. What is some advice, if you learned any at all, that you could share that kind of helped you get through those tough times when you had 4 heads butting, or kind of wanting to go different directions?
Yeah. From my experience, it wasn't so much that we were butting heads all the time. It was just more that when you have more, like the more people you have at the table, the more of the less radical vision you have. You kind of just get the messy middle. You never get too specific or too radical with your vision. And so you become very mediocre, right? You just become the average. All your decisions are average. So yeah, I could write a book on failing businesses. Someday I'll do that. But I think I often compare it to a play. Like and I'm not a movie producer by any means of the imagination, but if you start a play, normally you write the script, you define, what kind of story I'm trying to tell, and then you go out and find the characters. A family business has characters, and they build the script around the characters, right? And that's often the challenge. I think it's just really important to have business be business and home be home. And some people can do that distinction very well, and some can't, right? So I think it's at some point you have to. I mean, it goes back to my reality conversation, but sometimes you just have to identify reality, right? Like if one family member wants to do something else, like let them. That's fine, right? Like often there's all these culturally just sort of unintended expectations around business, right? Like, I got into the business because I was sent to duty. Like it's just what you do. You grow up in the business, you expect that, you have to do that. It wasn't entrepreneurial by nature, I don't think. It just sort of was like, you have to do that, right? So, and over time, I had to make a decision. Is this something that I'm all in on? And is this what I'm doing? And the same for my partners, right? So, I think, it's so challenging. And then there's also the entitlement piece is big in every business, but in family business, I think more so. You really have to make sure that everybody's working, as hard as they can in their area of genius. And it becomes challenging when you're different, you're not in the wrong spot in the bus. It just, there's a lot there, right? So.
Yeah. So one of the common challenges I hear from business owners is I don't have time. And the the industry response is, well, you just got to find time. Well, that sounds easy, right? But when you're in the heat of the battle as a business owner and you've got an employee quitting and you've got a customer angry and you've got bills that have to be paid and all these things going on, finding time is not really a reality. So how do you help business owners find that time to be able to focus on their business so they can turn it around? Because these aren't just little quick, you do this, this, and this, and all of a sudden your business is often, making a lot of money. All the problems are solved. So any time management insights or tips you got there? You're listening to Small Business Pivots with Michael D. Morrison. If you're ready to get your business unstuck and grow, let's chat. Schedule your free session at michaeldmorrison.com. Now back to the show. Any time management insights or tips you got there?
Yeah, that's probably the first problem I help business owners solve is this time, right? One of my mentors, I signed up for CO Alliance with a guy named Cameron Harold. The first thing I remember him telling me was, this is a group call, so something we're best friends. But I remember him saying, if you don't have an executive assistant, you are one. And I'm like, I'm running a small little family business. Like, do I need an executive assistant to help me, do administrative work? But I'm like, you know what? I'm all in on this thing, so I'm going to try it. So I hired my first executive assistant. It didn't work at all, so I hired my second one, and she's with me today. She's actually grown into a much more significant role in the business. But I think what I often look at is what's the highest value work you do, right? I was coaching a guy last month before my holidays, and I took his total sales that he generates, and I divided it by the amount of time he spends in front of clients, which is about 7 hours a week. So just so you know, we're talking thousands of dollars. This is how much you're generating per hour in front of a client. Now, I get that you may not have enough phone calls. I know it's not perfectly linear, but I do know that if I change that and I double it and it becomes 14 hours a week, the odds of sales going up is fairly high, right? So suddenly, if you're making, $8,000 per hour, which sounds crazy, suddenly paying someone $25 an hour to do bookkeeping or submit your receipts seems like it makes a lot of sense, right? So really getting crisp on, what's super high value for me. Some things are really high value and not delegatable, and that's okay. Just make sure that they're yours and you're doing them in a timely, efficient, top of your pile kind of way. And the stuff that you can delegate, and often we're delegating, we're delegating to someone that's doing it slower and worse than us, and that is what it is. But there's still value because we're not doing it right. So I think that's the biggest challenge: identifying what you're really good at.
Well, you mentioned slower and not as good as, but I also think they're more consistent. Like an executive assistant, they actually get it done versus business owners. We get pulled away in the middle of trying to get something done and then it never gets done. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So on the business owners, at what level are they ready for a service like yours, a coaching, a consultant? Are you a coach or a consultant? Or do you do both? What's the difference?
Yeah, so change management is all about managing pace and managing energy. It takes a lot of energy for an organization to change. I guess what I'm saying is, on one end, if you want to go really fast, then you need to give me control. I need to jump right in, bring my team in. I need to help you out, probably. The other end is more slow. Like, hey, we'll just chat for half an hour a week and I'll coach you through it, right? So the question is, how fast do you want to go? And sometimes that's dictated by the size of the problem you're dealing with, right? So there's a couple of ways I sort of work with clients on the high end, on the fast, sort of the fast lane. I would need more control. So let's either a sort of a fractional COO, where I'm coming in, I'm making decisions on behalf of your organization. Usually I'm rarely making anything like just rubber stamp sort of thing. It's very conversational. I'm sitting down with parties. I'm getting everybody on board. I'm coaching, messaging. It still is quite slow, but I'm there. I got a desk in the office, that kind of thing. And that's helpful, especially if you're navigating change and sort of, speaking to a banker or that sort of thing, because it's a very visual role. And what they're looking for in terms of confidence is to see that I actually have ability to do the things I'm promising, right? Coaching and advisory is more like, hey, I'm riding shotgun with the business owner, the operator, I should say. not always the owner, the operator, and I'm coaching him through the problems, challenges, helping him see the next steps, and then helping him sometimes make those steps well, right? So what's interesting is a lot of times business owners know what the next step is, right? They know they need to hire a salesperson. The problem is they don't always hire the right salesperson, or they hire them too late, right? And so I often will help them sort of refine that decision and make sure it's right. And sort of that's sort of the high value piece that you get, because I've experienced doing it wrong, frankly, right? So I've done a bunch of mistakes in my lifetime. Imagine that, and I help others avoid the same mistakes.
Yeah. So, what size of a business is this good for coaching? Because some of them have resources more than others. Some have more financial resources. Some of them have more of a team. When we get deep diving into something like what you offer, do they need to have a C-suite with them, or do you just work with the business owner? Like, what size of businesses is this applicable for?
Yeah, I would say my ideal client has a management team, because then I can sort of coach the HR person or the salesperson, or there's someone sort of involved or owning each discipline in the organization, and they're actually like good at it. Whereas when you're dealing with a single owner, they often are good at some things and not good at other things, right? So coaching someone that doesn't know finance, how to do finance, is not worth my time. It's just not. It just doesn't pay out, right? So I would say right now I work with everyone from like a 3 million is probably my smallest, up to about the biggest is about 40-ish. That's the highest I've been. Once you get past that, you almost need to just bring in a full-time COO, right? That's almost too big. I need to be there more than 3 days a week. Like it's a lot, right?
Yeah.
You need someone to really lead the cultural change, and it's hard to do that fractionally. So it's a pretty big span. My ideal client, like I said, has a management team, and has a leader that wants to change and wants to own the change, right? I'm not looking to replace the leader. I'm not looking to take all the credit. I'm actually looking just to be in the background and help them succeed without them giving their entire business away to some guy, right? So that's trying to sort of walk that fine line.
So, one of the commonalities here that we've talked about is people, right? We've talked cultures, we've talked management team, operations. Those all kind of require people. So that's one of the biggest challenges that I continue to hear from the contractor space, the building space, manufacturing, all that. So do you have any like best practices on how to get those right people? Because you even mentioned before, you hired an executive assistant, the wrong assistant, but now you have a great one. So what are some lessons that you've learned that you can share with people rather than just hiring on gut? Because that's what most of them do, right? Oh, I liked her. She was nice. She feels like a fit. And then 3 weeks later, it's like, I can't, how did she get in this building? Any tips on that? Because that seems to be a big challenge of finding the right people and then retaining those people.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting you mentioned gut, because I would say it's important to hire not for skill, but for passion. And that might sound fuzzy, but what I mean is people that are skilled don't always they're not always on mission for what you're doing or how you're going about it. Any variance, even if they're like 80% aligned with you, over time it's going to probably grow in the opposite direction. What I do is, so the first thing I do when I'm hiring is I create a package. And so it's a 20-page package, and we're very specific about the person we're looking for. We're specific about the role, what they're doing. Of course, that's important, the role description. We're very specific about the top 3 sort of personalities or qualities that they might have, right? And what I'm thinking about is what's the thing that if they don't have it, it's not going to be a fit, right? Like I'm hiring a receptionist and they don't love talking, they're not highly extroverted, they're not a people person, like it ain't going to work. They might fake it for 3 weeks, right? So what's the thing that is not going to work? They're going to quit or I'm going to fire them. What are those 3 hills they're going to die on? And just tell them up front, like, listen, you need to be really detail oriented because there's a lot of detail here. If you make one mistake, someone's yelling at you. Well, if you're detail oriented, if you're not detail oriented, you see that, you're like, yeah, I'm going to pass on that one, right? So I want to be very clear about the type of person you're looking for. The kiss of death in recruitment is when people say, I'm going to cast a wide net and see what happens. Like that just means that the best person, to interview gets the job, which might be good for sales because you want that, but it's not always good for 85% of roles, right? So getting very specific. I put a package together. I personally do a video for every single recruitment I do, and I just explain the job, and I just talk about how the job intersects, how the role intersects with where we're going as a company, like why it adds value, why it would be awesome to have you on our team and talk about the values and who we are as a company. So values, mission, how we behave. And then I ask you for a response. What I'm asking for is tell me what about this package is exciting to you? What gets you wired up? And then say, listen, send me an email, send me a video is preferred. If you want 100% to be seen, send a video. And that immediately weed it down to people that are passionate enough to actually spend time on it. Anything that's ChatGPT or Claude or something like that gets chucked in the garbage because you can't, actually readily email in 2026. That's tough. And tell them up front, I don't do AI as far as that goes. So, and then it instantly narrows you down to like sometimes like 10 candidates out of 200 or 300. But all of them have essentially given you an interview. They've given you a 3 to 4 minute video. And then you go through and I look at skill and say, okay, who's the best fit here? Meet in person interview, and then we're off to the races, right? But in the old days, I used to hire for skill, and then I had a gut feeling, and I would override it with my head. So I was like, oh, it doesn't seem like a perfect fit. And I'm like, well, but he has this and he has this, and I'm thinking about all the tangible, technical things. Now I've learned that my gut's usually right. But what I do is take time to say, okay, what is my gut telling me? Not words, but what is my gut seeing that I'm not seeing? Because a whole bunch of yellow flags do make up red flags, right? So. But yeah, to short answer, it's all about passion. You want someone that's fired up, and I'd rather train somebody the skills and give them a little bit of time to run away, which is, I would say is a critical piece of is onboarding. Like people do not onboard staff well. It's like, hey, you're the perfect fit. Good luck. And they're like working their butt off, but they're going a different direction than you want them to. And we're all confused and dazed when it doesn't work out. So yeah, get the exact right fit and invest in them.
Well, you kind of, that was a segue into our next part, and that is onboarding, because they come in and then now what do I do? And then we get frustrated because they're not doing what we want them to do. What are some tips, since you had such great hiring tips for onboarding, and then of course following the retention? Because as a COO, I would think that would be the important puzzle first, is do we have the right people on the right bus in the right seat going the right direction, right? So now that we've found that person, what are some onboarding tips and then retention tips to keep them there?
Yeah. I would say especially for high level hires, like C-suite, management team, managers, I often encourage them not to add value early on. Like they often try to come in, they're going to save you, right? I got to find that one $20,000 from the CRA that you haven't seen before. They're gonna, right? And it's like, just calm down. Like the business not on fire. So you're not going to find some magical, and if you do, cool. I mean, I'll love you for it. But you'll still find it on month 3 probably, right? So just get to know the business, get to know the systems, just sniff around, right? Make lists, make notes, book some time, that kind of thing. Just breathe, take time. You're not going to get fired on week 3 because you haven't found a silver bullet that's going to, make us a millionaire. So just, especially at C-suite, like just calm down, understand the business first. And then I often like just the questions they're asking are super critical. Like, if they understand the business well, they're asking the right questions, they're digging in the right spots. Those are the things that tell you that you've got the right hire on board. And then I think training ideally is sort of, cross-reference as much as possible, right? So like sitting down with other people in the organization, not just sitting down with one person, your manager, and getting trained everything. Not like, here's a manual, but more like understanding the why. This is how we do it. This is why it's important to me. Those sorts of things. Helping them understand sort of the methodology of the organization top to bottom, I think is really critical. Because a lot of people are doing stuff, but they don't really understand why they're doing it or how critical it is, right? Like, if you're, for example, if you're a financial CFO and you're onboarding with me, it's like, okay, I need to see monthly reports by the 15th. Yeah. And if I don't see them by the 15th, you and I are not going to be best friends. Like that's a big deal for me, right? So, and often they're like trying to do these other 45 things, but they're missing the one thing that's the hill I'm ready to die on, right? So I think being really, really critical, like for sure specific around the critical elements of their role, because they will often see it differently than you do as a manager, right? So I think that's sort of the training piece. Retention, yeah, every business is different. I would say, like, some businesses do lots of parties and get-togethers. Some, and those things are all helpful and cute. Like I don't want to, say those things don't add value. I think people are striving for connection in the world. They need to be connected with each other and with their manager. And so I I think a critical piece is one-on-ones. Healthy businesses have a regular cadence of one-on-ones with their manager. Their manager, like if you think about it, your manager is the person that has the most impact on your life at work. You spend a lot of your time of your life at work, right? So I think it's really critical. I think the ideal one-on-one, you're having it, and you're not sure why, right? Like you're getting together, like I don't know what he's got on his topic. Like the person you're meeting with, like the manager should not hold the agenda, the other person should. The direct report should come and say, hey, here's what's on the list. Here's questions for you. If you're having the meeting because they have questions, because they have concerns, it's too late. They've sat on them for 6 months. They've ruminated. They talked to their friends. They made lists about it. They ChatGPT it and Googled it, right? And now they're telling you. Now that they've got a whole plan together, right? So I think it's really critical just to have a regular cadence of just sitting down and being human, talking about how it's going. Hey, how can I help you? It should be the question that comes out of every manager's mouth at least once a month, if not once a week, right? How can I help you? What are you up to? What's pissing you off right now? And how can I help you, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that sounds more leadership. So what type of leadership training do you suggest for a business to get started in? Because there's a lot of books out there. There's a lot of training. There's a lot of coaching, but leadership, like you said, your example is let them come with questions. You don't read that everywhere. So what is some basic leadership traits that a leader should be learning about or acquiring?
Yeah, I think the number one trait I look for in a leader is it's going to sound weird, but the ability to collaborate. A lot of people really struggle to collaborate. So they're either like pushing ideas on other people, and then everyone's kind of scared and like, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do it. And they undermine it after. Or they have a great idea and they sit on it. Or they're too scared to go to their boss and say, hey, I have a great idea. I think this is a bad idea. Like just the ability to sort of just mess around with ideas and say, hey, is there a way to make this thing better? Is there a way to make this decision better? And so I often look for that. One of the questions I ask myself when I'm hiring is, what does this person look like mad? You can tell. Sometimes you're talking to someone like, I bet you this person's like my best friend. If we could go golfing together, we could do this. But then I think to myself, what do they look like mad? I'm like, oh, yeah, I could see that not being fun. Yeah, I don't know how to describe it. Like, there's no like, I'm not sure what the official trait is, what StrengthsFinder is. For that, I just like my gut tells me they're not a lot of fun to cross,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of important. I think a lot of, there's I forget how the saying goes, but it's something to the effect of it should scare us more. We shouldn't be asking ourselves like, what happens if I invest in this person and he leaves? We should ask ourselves, what happens if we don't invest in this person and he stays? Right? That's
a good one.
that's the challenge. So I think a lot of people don't invest nearly enough in technical or sort of leadership training. Like a lot of folks come off the floor, get thrown on the desk. They don't know how to run an Outlook calendar, right? They've never seen, can't read an Excel sheet. They don't have, and now like AI can cover some of those things, so we look like we're intelligent and competent. But the fundamental sort of understanding of how a business functions and runs, it's not always is passed on. And I think that's why I think cross-functional training is super important, right? So being able to do more than one job in an organization, especially when folks go on holidays, that kind of thing, it doesn't just help your team get through, busy times. It also helps sort of give people a better perspective of the organization and learn what it means to be in different seats, right? So, yeah, there's lots of programs out there. I can name a bunch of them if you wanted to, but I think a lot of them, like I actually love some of the ones that are more like either like packages where you buy it online and you sort of go through it at your own pace, because when you're forced to sit down and listen to someone talk on Zoom, it's less than fun. I hate that.
Yeah.
Right? Finding something that gives them the skill and the talent and the ability so that they can learn the information, and then go offline, say with the management team and say, hey, let's talk about what we learned and apply it to your business. Like you need both pieces. You need the content, the information, but you also need to say, how do we make this real in my organization today?
Yeah. And it kind of goes to your tagline on your website. Just my personal opinion, I do think some people are born with the swag, right, to be a leader, but you have great businesses. Great businesses aren't born, they're built. And I feel the same way about leaders. I feel like even if you are someone that people look up to, you can still be better. Like you can still learn more. And so that's kind of what you're talking about, is those programs where you kind of go at your own pace, right? It's not forced.
Mm-hmm.
It's a transformation.
Yeah. Yeah, and if one of your team members doesn't take it, doesn't do it, that's often the complaint people have. Well, I give it to my team, but they don't actually do it. I'm like, well, behaviors are language. They're telling you they don't want to grow.
Yeah,
So that's the conversation you need to have. Now you know that it's on the table. Would you rather they just faked it and slept through 10 sessions and then
that's
wonder why your
good.
business doesn't change, right? So what we're doing is putting reality on the table and saying this is what's currently, true or real in this situation, and it forces you as a leader to deal with it. Are you going to accept it or celebrate it, right, or
Yeah.
ignore it?
Yeah,
And
no, that's good. I haven't heard someone say that. So, where are some places people can follow you, connect with you, podcast, YouTube channels, social media channels? What's the best place to learn more?
yeah, I'm usually hanging out on LinkedIn. That's the primary social media avenue. Josh Post is pretty easy to find. My website is josh-post.com, and for the purpose of this podcast, /small business pivots, and we'll get you some specific tailored content for your audience. Short version, the best way to connect with me if you're stuck, if your business is stuck at 80%, and it feels like a lot of things are going really well, but you just can't unlock that last 20% that's driving you crazy. Hop on a call. My process is pretty simple. I don't charge for initial calls or anything. Usually my first step is diagnosis. I sit down with your team, sit down with humans. Within a day, I'll give you my assessment on where your culture is at, how it's holding your business back. And then if you think I'm right, I think we have the problem diagnosed, then yeah, we can just custom tailor a plan to go fix it, and go from there. So yeah, feel free to connect with me that way. Otherwise, yeah, DM me or shoot me an email, josh@josh-post.com. Pretty straightforward. So
I end the show with a question. And so today's question, with you being a coach and consultant, what is something a business owner could do now that you don't really read in books? There's a lot of things in a lot of these business books that, culture building and this, and this. But what's one thing that a business owner could do this week to start moving that needle to prepare for next steps that you don't read often?
yeah, well, good question. I think one of the things I've learned is that business is actually quite simple. It's not easy, but it's actually quite simple. So if I had to challenge a business owner right now, I would say, what's the number one thing you want to change? Like, do you want to move, 18 widgets out of your facility versus 15 you're doing now? Like, what's the thing you want to change? Get the people in the room who have the most impact on that number, and just ask them. Say, hey guys, I want you guys to move from 15 to 18, and see what they say. And I bet you dollars and donuts that they probably have a solution for you. Now, it might say, hey, here are 3 problems you need to fix, so I can do this for you. But yeah, take the biggest problem you have, sit down with people who have the most impact on it, and just ask them, how can we get from here to here? So you as leader providing a vision, and then you're just inviting your team into it and say, hey, I don't have all the answers. That's why I hired you.
Yeah.
Help me. Let's do this together. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. And I love the part about just ask them. And that right there could be for anything. If you're having troubles, just ask them. If you don't know what to market to your customers, ask them. Ask
Yeah.
prospects, right? You can just ask, because I know a lot of business owners, we try to figure things out ourselves because we're problem solvers. And so sometimes we don't ask for help, and we don't just simply ask, how to
Yeah.
do that. And we try to solve it. And sometimes that's not always the right way.
Yeah, and that's the maturity, right? That's growth, right? Like babies scream when they need food. At some
Yeah.
point, they start using words and say, "Hey, can I?"
Yeah.
And when they get older and the teenagers, they just go in your fridge and get the food. So it's a growth journey. Using words, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Josh, you've been a blessing to many today. I appreciate your time and your insights, and I wish you continued success.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Michael. It's been great to connect.
My pleasure. Thanks for listening to Small Business Pivots. If you're ready to get unstuck and grow, schedule your free coaching session at michaeldmorrison.com. On social media, you can find and connect with me using the handle Michael D. Morrison OKC. And if today's episode helped you, subscribe and share it with other business owners. Until next week, keep pivoting.